Well, you're going to get a Mother's Day message today, whether you like it or not. And it's kind of a subject that we often don't think about. We think of it wrongly, but my message today is, what is a mother? Yeah, we know it's someone that washes the dishes and cleans the floors and dusts the house and does all of the work while the husband sits in a chair and drinks a beer or watches a football game or whatever the husbands do while a woman slaves away in the house. And don't throw anything at me for saying all that. But our text is John 19, 25 through 27. It's a very interesting passage, and it's often misunderstood. It's a very difficult passage to understand, especially in Hebrew. The Greek makes it very clear exactly what's going on, and we're going to talk about it because it's a very pertinent passage for us to understand. And it says, and this is coming from my book that I translated, and it says, nearby the crossbeam of Jesus, and it's close in proximity, but not close enough for Jesus to see, stood his mother and his mother's sister Miriam, the wife of Clopas, and Miriam the Magdalene. Now, the Greek makes it very clear here that Jesus is not addressing his mother, Miriam. And Jesus, not seeing his mother, but his student, which he loved, standing by him, his disciple, and he said unto him, Woman, meaning Israel, the entity that birthed Jesus, behold, this is your son, son of righteousness, the only one Israel will ever have, your anointed one. And afterwards he said to his disciple, student, said, Behold, this is your mother, basically addressing the crowd. And from that hour the student, the disciple, took her in, assembled and cared for Israel to his home. And according to this account, at this time John became the caretaker of the movement and of Israel. Now, this is a reference to a Jewish passage in the Talmud which deals with a son who inherits from a father, while going to the grave, his rights to grant an inheritance. And it's very important us to understand that. So Jesus, as he was dying, he granted the rights to inheritance to the leader of this movement. Now, this passage is often quoted on Mother's Day, but rarely understood, as people have a misunderstanding that Jesus is addressing his mother, when he is absolutely not addressing his mother. However, that being said, we see something being said here that is quite important when we ask ourselves, what is a mother? Because he's addressed the disciple and addressed people around him saying, here is your mother. So we ask ourselves, what is he talking about? And in fact, the answer to this question is going to be critical when viewed amongst the millions of mothers today who often question their worth and their mission in life. And I'm here to tell you that there are millions upon millions of women out here who have no idea what they are doing. They think that being a mother is somehow beneath them. They don't know why they're a mother, why they're doing these things. They don't know what their job is. And they're frustrated. They hear the world say, oh, you shouldn't be a mother. You should go out and only have a job. Go leave your kids in daycare or whatever. They don't understand this fundamental question. Many people today will assemble themselves to just give mere lip service to mothers, or wax sentimental about a mother without ever truly reflecting on the important message Jesus gave to us about mothers. You see, to honor motherhood is to honor womanhood. Even though Eve fell, she fell with Adam standing right next to her, not saying a peep. Didn't even utter or open his mouth to say anything. Like, stop, no, don't do that, Eve. He stood there right beside her and fell alongside her. But Jesus honored motherhood and women by intimating their critical role in His kingdom. We in turn must realize that we men, if Jesus is our example, we must honor women, for they are the only creatures to bear children, and God gave them the most coveted position or role in the home, regardless of what many men think. The man is not the head of the house. He is the priest of the home. And it is his spiritual duty to ensure a spiritual covering and protection over his family. But the woman is the head of the home. The wife and the mother of a home is called in Hebrew Akeret Habayit. And it literally means the mainstay. She is the one who is the rock of the home. And it is she who largely determines the character and atmosphere of the home. God demands that a believer's home should have a righteous character, not merely on Sundays or on the holidays, and Christmas, Easter, something like that, but on an ordinary weekday. It matters. It must be a righteous home in every aspect and respect. The home becomes an abode for God's presence. A home for godliness, and one which God says, "Make me a sanctuary, and I shall dwell among them." And the Jews literally believed that the home was the sanctuary of God, because God dwelt there with the husband and the wife, just like He dwelled with Adam and Eve in the garden. When a righteous mother creates a righteous home, it is a home where God's presence is felt on every day of the week. Not only when we engage in prayer and Bible study, but also when we engage in ordinary activities such as eating and drinking. This is done in accordance with the directive, "Know Him in all of your ways," which is Proverbs 3:6. The believer's home, it becomes a home where a mealtime is not just a time to indulge in a beautiful repast with all the goodies, but yet it becomes a home with a holy service to God, sanctified by a blessing over the food and a spiritual and uplifting conversation during the meal. It's not a time to argue. It's a time to discuss God, time to discuss our lives, and enjoy each other's intimate social time. The believing mother creates a home where a mutual relationship between a husband and a wife is sanctified by meticulous observance of God's desires. The husband and wife need to find out, what is our desire with God? It's permeated with this awareness that they have a presence of this third partner in their relationship, God. When this happens, and the husband and wife are in this relationship, then they have a hand in the creation of a new life. In fulfillment of the divine commandment, be fruitful and multiply. God's blessing is upon the multiplication. This also helps ensure that children are born into an atmosphere of purity and holiness, with pure hearts and pure minds that will enable them to resist the temptations of the world and avoid the pitfalls of the worldly environment when they grow up. And man, that is a terrible thing to worry about. This godly behavior is a basic factor in the preservation of peace and harmony, what is called the Shalom Habayit, the peace of the home. And it's vitally strengthened and fortified thereby, and obviously a basic factor in the preservation of the family as a unit. So peace in the home, this righteous atmosphere which the mothers are responsible for, is critical in understanding that our children have to be taught. The believing mother creates a home where the parents know that their first obligation is to instill into their offspring from their most tender age the love and the fear of God, permeating the children with the joy of performing good deeds to others, so that teaches a generous heart, what the Bible refers to as a good eye. In the New Testament, you'll read that. That is taught from the time a child is young by the mother, how to be generous, how to give to others food or clothing as she takes care of her household. The reason this is so important is because despite parents' desires to provide their children with all the good things in life, believing parents must know that the greatest and indeed the only real and eternal legacy that they can bequeath to their children is to make their Bible and their intimate relationship with God their life source and guide in daily life. This is what the mother teaches the children. The believing wife and mother has a primary role second to none. It is largely and in many respects exclusively her great task and privilege to give her home its truly righteous atmosphere. She was entrusted with offering to her family the nutritious food that appears on the dining table. She was actually given the privilege of ushering in the most holy day of the week, the most holy of all feasts or festivals, the Sabbath. Because even though the Day of Atonement is great, it only comes once a year. Sabbath comes every week, 52 times a year. And it was she who was granted the ability to usher that great day into existence. It symbolically brightens her home with peace and harmony. It is largely in her merits that God bestows the blessings of true happiness on her husband and children and the entire household. You know, there's an old saying, when the mother's happy, everybody's happy. And it is very true, because if the mommy ain't happy, ain't nobody happy in that house. So God bestowed upon her the ability to bring happiness and joy into the entire home. It is to be remembered that God has provided each and every believing woman with the capacity to carry out His godly directives in daily life to the fullest. Because if He had not bestowed upon the woman that capacity, it wouldn't be logical or fair for God to give obligations and duties to someone which are impossible to fulfill. So every person is able to carry out God's desires. You know, for Jesus, and within the Jewish culture which He arose, it should be noted that the very Jewishness of a person is dependent upon the mother, not the father. In Jewish law, if a person's mother is Jewish, then the person is Jewish. If only the father is Jewish, but the mother is a non-Jew, then the child is not Jewish. And they would have to go through basically conversion. This very fact indicates the woman's primary role in preserving the Jewish identity and values of which Jesus grew up. While the mother's place in the believing home is great, it does not mean that her place is solely in the home and that she should not follow a career. But rather it's the realization that the primary role of a mother is that of homemaking. The home and family unit being the nucleus of the extended community. Did you know that modern psychologists are affirming more and more of what the Bible has always taught us? And that is that a secure and loving home built on solid moral and ethical values, those are the basic building blocks of society. And to pursue a career at the expense of shunning one's inborn and granted obligations and privilege in this area is misguided. Too often, we listen to people tell us to do something that's not in our best interest. Too often, women who have children feel unfulfilled because they don't understand their role and the importance of their role, and they don't take it to heart because somebody else has told them, oh, you just stick them in daycare, they'll be fine. Well, they may not be fine. There's some bad things that can happen because other people don't care for your children like you do. When a woman creates a righteous home and educates her family in the Bible and teaches her family how to exist within God's existence and presence, she is deserving of King Solomon's praises found in Proverbs 31 and 10. Now, I know some of you are familiar with this passage, but many of you may not. And I want to read you this because it's a very important passage. Because this is the passage that Jesus is touching on when he's hanging on the cross. Who can find a virtuous woman? Who was Jesus addressing on a cross? Behold, this is your mother. So think about that. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and gives meat to her household. Her hands she planted a vineyard. She considereth the field and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she plants a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good. Her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor. Yea, she reacheth forth her hand to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes fine linen and sells it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She opened her mouth in wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain. But a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own work praise her in the gates. Now think about what Jesus said on the cross. This is what Jesus was telling us in John when he says, behold your mother. He was describing her in these terms. Jesus was telling us to honor our own mothers as we honor Israel, who gave birth to our Messiah, Jesus, and the disciples as well, who were the inheritance of the honor of bestowing upon us the religious character of Jesus. We are to continue in the righteous endeavors that our believing mothers prayed for us to accomplish. And we are to care for our mothers in honor of the righteousness that was passed to us from them. We are to behold our mothers and thank God for their prayers and their righteousness and their hard work to make our homes a place of godliness that brings peace and joy to our families. For without this singular blessing of motherhood being understood by the women of the world, motherhood just becomes another futile, animalistic act, and children and husbands are just collateral damage to a free life that ends in tragedy. This is the true understanding of the question of what is a mother. She should be the embodiment of righteousness, the embodiment of the nurturing that brings both physical and spiritual life to her offspring and ultimately the offspring of God. As we honor our mothers today, I want all of us to think on what would our lives be like if it wasn't for our mothers. First off, we wouldn't be here. But our mothers raised us and gave us life. Some people may not have had blessed mothers, but some people had great mothers. But we have to thank God nonetheless, and it's our duty to teach what is right about mothers, because they have a tremendous opportunity for good in the world.